I think we can start slowly. So I have already shared the screen. So, okay. So, welcome everyone. Today we are having our third webinar, ISA webinar, and I'm today's moderator. My name is Ebru. I'm the Secretary General of ISA, and today we have a very interesting subject and very interesting speakers. So just show a little presentation and inform you about ISA and what we do. So first of all, ISA. ISA is a network who creates synergy between universities around the world that foster collaboration between law and technology faculties and other organisms that can contribute to necessary interdisciplinarity. And we are doing a lot of different kind of activities for universities and students in order to and for teachers in order to create a common synergy to transform the legal sector. What do we do at ISA? As I mentioned before, we have like different kind of activities. We promote engagement, sharing of best practices. We are doing events on digital transformation, innovation, legal tech, and also we are promoting and supporting innovative trainers within our member universities. And we are lobbying for transformation of the legal education. What we do, as I mentioned before, innovation, collaboration, best practices exchange, we have a global scope. We have now over 18 member universities, and we are partnering with 6 legal tech companies in order to create the synergy. And every day our member network is growing. And about today's program and our speakers, just give me 1 second. We have 3 speakers today. Diane O'Leary, who is an associate professor of legal writing, director, legal innovation of technology concentration at Suffolk University from US. We have David Fisher, who is the founder and CEO at Integral Ledger, and he is an expert in blockchain for the global legal industry. He is from Denver, Colorado, again from United States. And our third speaker will be Maria Jesus Gonzalez Espejo, and she is the managing partner of Instituto de Innovación Legal, and also she is the president of Innovation in Law Studies Alliance, and she is from Madrid, Spain. So coming back to our topic today, it is what is a legal hackathon and how to organize them. So structure of the webinar will be each topic, there will be a brief introduction. Each panelist will explain themselves, and then later on we will have 5 questions, and we will do 1 question and 3 keynotes, 1 question and 3 keynotes, and at the end we'll have and also we will have a Q&A section. So before giving the floor to our panelists, I just want to explain a little bit about what is a legal hackathon and how to successfully organize one. So especially the idea of this hackathon is coming from Maria Jesus because she is a very passionate person, and she is very passionate about legal hackathons, because they are the tools to create real change. And so what is a legal hackathon? So how they can be used. These are the topics that we will discuss, but basically a hackathon the hackathon has three ingredients: people, challenges, and location. But during the pandemic, most of the hackathons just turned into virtual. And the thing is, like with a hackathon, it's a tool of innovation that you create ideas in a defined time frame with different participants coming in, sharing their ideas, prototyping, and creating a solution for a problem or a challenge that is defined or before. Maria Jesus also, the ideal participant, maybe Maria Jesus will be also speaking about this, but she is, because of her previous experiences with three very successful hackathons, today now we are having this wonderful webinar. And now I think it's time for me to give the floor to our dear speakers. Diane, could you please introduce yourself? And David, later on, if you take the floor, it will be great. And Maria, at the end, please take the floor at the end.
Sure. And Ebru, just to confirm, am I to dive in right to the first question, or is David going first on that?
No, if you could explain yourself a little bit about yourselves, it would be nice. Because I just introduced yourself, but it would be great, like for a couple of minutes to, give information about yourself. It would be great.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, at least where I am in the Northeast in Boston, Massachusetts. Nice to be here. My name is Diane O'Leary. I'm a professor at Suffolk University Law School in Boston, where I co-direct our law school's legal innovation and technology concentration. So essentially an academic major where our JD students can focus their studies specifically on legal innovation and technology classes. And externships and things like that. And then I've also been involved in the past few years at integrating legal innovation and technology skills into our kind of everyday curriculum, if you will, for all law students. So I teach the legal writing class and have been involved in research and scholarship and presentations and classwork about how to better integrate technology competence into kind of that everyday lawyering that we're already teaching students. And in terms of my hackathon experience, Suffolk has been involved in several, but the one most specifically is we, for 4 years now, have paired with a large insurance company here in Boston to put on a legal design challenge that's been very well received in the community and by our students. And so I'm excited to share my experience of that. I also, a few years ago, did research and wrote a scholarly law review article on the intersection between kind of the hackathon culture and intellectual property rights, and kind of how those can be better addressed and fostered to kind of hopefully create better outcomes from some of these events. So kind of, I'd say my perspective is certainly student focused first, and then kind of the angle of some of the logistics and the intellectual property concerns and opportunities around these type of events. So look forward to sharing and hearing everyone's ideas today.
Thank you, Diane. David?
Yes, thanks very much for having me. I'm the founder and CEO of Integra Ledger, which is a leading enterprise blockchain company for the global legal industry. I'm also the founder of the Global Legal Blockchain Consortium, which is the largest consortium in the world for blockchain technology in the legal industry. That's about 350 organizations in 35 countries. And then finally, I'm the founder of the Global Legal Hackathon, which is the largest legal technology innovation event in the world and the largest hackathon in the world in the legal industry, and one of the biggest in any industries. We've involved about 19,000 people over the last 3 years from, I think we're up to about 75 countries for that. I'm extremely passionate about the hackathon format for innovation and especially education for innovation. And so I'm very happy to share my experience with everyone today.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Maria?
Well, I will be brief. I will be brief because you said so many things about me, so I don't think it's really necessary. I'm here because I believe in the Innovation in Law Studies Alliance, because I really think that it is better and easier to change together than to do it individually. And I think that law faculties could do so much good together for the challenges that the world has at the moment, which are growing exponentially. And that's one of the reasons why we are here. And I'm so happy that you, David, and Diane came here to share your views and experience on this field. I have to confess that I'm here because of Suffolk University. I haven't studied there, but in the year 2012, I was a teacher in professional skills, like you, Diane, in ICADE, a private, very, very nice university. And I was quite frustrated with the students, and because I had my hopes put in them, the young people, and I was seeing that they were more or less as blind as the old lawyers in what regards to skills, law firms management, and technology. So I suddenly read that Suffolk was organizing a hackathon and making apps for better justice, and that was my inspiration. So then 2 years later, David, your colleague, Eileen, I think she's your colleague, she called me because she wanted us to join your hackathon. But I was exhausted because I had just finished my first hackathon, and I will share that later, but my experience has been really tiring. So I said I had no energy left. So I have links with you. I'm here because of you, and part of my career is due to Suffolk University inspiration. So thank you for being here. Let's start, Ibru, with the questions. Let's go.
Sure. So our first question, why do law schools should organize hackathons? And Diane, if we can go with you first, and then David, and then Maria, please.
Sure, happy to kick that off. And maybe I'll rephrase it as, why shouldn't they organize hackathons, perhaps, right? I'll try not to be too US focused. I think a lot of kind of the critique of legal education is global and not just in the United States. But at least for decades now in the States, there's been a critique of law schools that we don't do enough to prepare our students kind of for practical skills, right? Whether that's in a courtroom, doing a deposition, creating a merger agreement, that we need to kind of get students more real world ready. And there's so many different kind of ways to do that and ways to think about it. And I think kind of creating events for students, and I'll put hackathons as kind of one of those events, is one small way to do that, right? And so I think it helps to very broadly start us off by thinking of hackathons alongside trial competitions or, moot court things and other kind of active engagement that students can have. So I think that at the very bottom is kind of a baseline reason to think about it. The other kind of broad concept I'll start us off with is there's some scholarship that I've read that talks about the idea of a T-shaped lawyer. So I think everyone can see me, if you will, if you're not familiar with, think of a T. And the idea is that a lawyer obviously needs that kind of base of deep legal knowledge and analysis and research and the things law schools are primarily tasked with giving them. But at kind of the top of the T, the idea now is that they need more than that. And so they need kind of shallow knowledge in a bunch of different areas. So business, project management, innovation, technology, cross-discipline, design thinking, and that would appropriately kind of best serve the modern client. So it's something I talk to my students about. And again, I think hackathons fit in because it's a way to kind of, yes, the students have that shallow T knowledge, or I'm sorry, that deep legal T knowledge, but hackathons are a small way to kind of touch at the idea that they should be learning more than that, even if frankly in a day or a week, right? But the idea that we can give our students kind of a little bit of a taste of different skills, I think will hopefully serve them a long way. And I know David and Maria have so many other things to add. The last kind of practical piece is exposure. I think from my point of view, students, the feedback is striking in the sense that they love being exposed to people outside the classroom. So we've paired with vendors, we've paired with sponsors, we've had guest judges that are in-house counsel at different companies. And to maybe some of us, we take that for granted, that interaction. Students seem to adore it. And I think sometimes in the classroom, they're so insulated, we forget that. At least I forget that sometimes as an educator. And so at least kind of a very practical sense, hackathons have been a way to kind of get students exposed to different people, which I think is a terrific thing. So both kind of the broad idea of practical skills and that idea of a T-shaped lawyer, but then very concretely, frankly, getting them to open their eyes beyond the classroom and see different companies and different lawyers is where I'll start us off.
Thank you, Diane. David?
Yeah, thanks, Diane. So I have the unique experience of again running the global legal hackathon, and through that background, I've interacted with the biggest companies and their in-house lawyers, the biggest law firms, a variety of law schools, individuals, technology. So across the entire spectrum and across many countries, and I think the feedback or the experience has taught me that it's people tend to associate hackathons with just technology innovation or certain outcomes. I'm very committed to the idea that hackathons are learning laboratories. You can't. I don't believe. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I don't believe you can teach innovation. You have to experience it. And what we've seen from every type of constituent in the world's legal community is that experiencing innovation can be transformative, life transforming, literally. I mean, I've had 20 and 30-year practitioners come to me and say they'd never experienced anything like that. And we're talking about like a 3-day weekend event where these are senior attorneys at big firms, big companies, deep into their career, 20, 30 years, saying they've, for a 3-day event, changed their life. And so I think my perspective on answering this question for law schools really is, why wait 20 or 30 years? Why not do it at the beginning? And a point of curiosity for me is, Diane, to your point, why not, right? And Suffolk is obviously one of the most innovative law schools in the world. And so it's just innovation is just part of the DNA of Suffolk. But what we've seen around the world is a surprisingly few law schools getting involved in hackathon format events. And so I'm extremely pleased at the topic of this webinar, because I think from what we've seen in the way it's transformative to individuals who then take that back to their organization. I mean, this is huge in its consequences. So if you think about a career in law and changing the trajectory of that career at the beginning, and what that means for the world's legal industry we all know that there's a huge problem with access to justice. Somewhere between 80 and 95% of the world's population does not have access. And that's extraordinary in its consequences. Economically, quality of life. It's everything from the simple sort of domestic, and family law, or if you don't have access to an attorney and you need to have a divorce, for example, and property rights. It's so fundamental, and there's such a massive gap in the world today. It in the legal industry, I think, doesn't fully appreciate its strategic importance to the quality of life for much of the world's population. And so I think for law schools to get much better at teaching, and again, it has to be in an experiential learning laboratory sort of way, but teaching innovation, not immediately, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we will see incredible impact around the world. I think this is far more important than anyone realizes. And our experience of how few law schools have embraced the hackathon model is an indicator of a failure to appreciate, the significance of changing that career trajectory for a generation or generations of lawyers. So again, this is part of the reason we founded the Global Legal Hackathon. Was to take the base, best practices for hackathons, learning laboratory, experiential education for this, and universalizing it, making it accessible to anyone. So it's hard from a standing start as a single institution, to run these events. You have to know how to do it. I mean, it seems easy, but actually there's a certain magic to doing it the right way. And how do you organize it, and how do you get the teams and the judges and mentors and so on and so forth. And so our spirit in this was to create sort of a global platform, best practices to engage anyone, any institution, any organization, any law school that would want to be a part of it. But what's very interesting, I can communicate to this group, is that very few law schools, have actually embraced it. And I think it's the consequences, for the world are much more significant than people realize. A couple more points. The nature of the legal industry is experiential, precedent, conservatism. I mean, it's the nature of the people it attracts. It's the nature of the education. And in fact, I mean, if you're a lawyer and you do something wrong, against sort of precedent or convention, I mean, that can be career threatening. And so in a law school setting where you do not have those sort of career threatening implications for, creative thinking or innovation, I mean, that's really the time to plant those seeds for, like, what is innovation? I mean, maybe you're not going to innovate in, the application of law per se, but to learn, like, how to have an idea, how to take action on it, how to turn it into something, I think is again, it's against sort of the tradition of the legal industry. But again, that's why at the education stage, it's really the perfect moment, to include that type of experiential, as we say, learning laboratory type of education, to actually experience innovation, know what it is, even if most of your career will be spent applying convention and tradition.
Thank you, David. And Maria?
Okay, I think that a lot has been said, so I will just try to summarize what to me are the reasons why universities should be doing this periodically. I would say that once or twice a year even. Well, first of all, I think that is a let's say an activity where everybody learns. Students learn, the teachers and the people at the university who organize the hackathon learn, and also the participants that come from outside, like lawyers or developers, etc., learn. And they all learn together. And I think that that's fantastic. There are not so many activities that have the same capacity. Secondly, it was mentioned already, but branch reinforcement. I think that there is huge competition in teaching law. Students are diminishing in many countries, and you need to be different. And a hackathon is something that can still differentiate you from other law faculties. In third place, corporate social responsibility. Law faculties, law students should assume their important, significant role. David was saying that many countries with no access to justice and with many other problems. And I think that we should teach students from the very beginning what their role is in life. And this is a, let's say, superior role than the one that many other professionals have, because we know the legal system, and the legal system is one of the few tools that in some places we have to fight against abuse of power, fraud, corruption, violence, etc. In fourth place, I think that hackathons are a superb way to understand very fast and in a very simple way the changes that are happening. When you sit down with people from other disciplines and you work together, suddenly you realize how weird is your mentality as a lawyer, how obsessed you are with law, and how little importance others give it to us, for instance. Then you realize what a different approach to working in teams you have compared to other professionals. All these kind of things are super useful for the new economy. Then I think that at least in the case of the ones I have organized, participants are so happy and proud that they have done this. They feel like they are different, that they are masters of universe because they have this prototype of app. In most cases, the app gets to nowhere. But at the beginning, when I organized my first hackathon, I was kind of frustrated because I was very naive. I imagined like, okay, 10 teams, 10 apps, 10 startups. I was super proud of my kids, you know, and then nothing came. They were calling me, they were having fights because of IP. So Diane, I hope you can illustrate us on this super important field. And of course, some of them were not working, the others were working much, and you know, fights started. And then, okay, this gave me other ideas that I will share later. And then finally, you enlarge your network. And for us legal professionals, it's difficult to reach developers. So hackathons are a great place to go and find your dream software developer. So great place to be. Maybe you can even make business because yes, maybe you are lucky and you find the right partner and you find the right team, and maybe your tool ends up becoming one of these fantastic unicorn, legal tech. So many reasons. As you see, I'm super fan of hackathons, and I really invite universities to do them.
Thank you very much, Maria. So from David, your answer to the first question, my takeaway is that a hackathon can change a perspective of a lawyer. So it's really, really important. Our second question, I would like to start with you. What do hackathons teach participants and organizers? So if you could answer this question from these two perspectives, it would be great. And later on, Maria and Diane, if you could give your answers, it would be great.
Yeah, so I think it's the format of the hackathon that's important. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, and so I wake up every day and I have to figure out what to do. No one's really telling me what to do, and so I'm used to the notion of having to take independent action. That's a life skill. That's not a lawyer thing. It's not a legal industry thing. It's not even an entrepreneurial thing, right? We all have to make independent decisions. But I think in a business context, or a legal context in this case, so the business of law, the format of the hackathon facilitates the learning. And so there are a couple key ingredients. One is there's a time limit, right? That forces decisions. That's number one. Two, if there's a competitive component to it, now you have competitive forces, and so it's recognition and ego, if you will. Some other critical parts of this, though, are randomness. So the typical format of a hackathon is you're coming to it without anything already created, without teams being formed usually. And in the best sort of hackathon, the ones that I've seen the best results, it's where nobody knows anyone. And so if you think about your life, you have your circle of friends, you have your circle of colleagues, and so you're sort of self-limited in what you know and who you know. And a hackathon is it's a little bit like an airport or some other public event where it's you have intersections of people that otherwise would never connect. And so that format of sort of an open call, in most cases, to bring random people together allows new connections to happen in magical ways. And then finally, and related to that last point, without the politics, of a pre-existing organization or team or boss or whatever, it facilitates open communication, open-mindedness, combined with a time limit, combined with competition. So in the perfect form, where I've seen the best results, you have random people who are forced to get together to compete, like to win something. I mean, that's about as opposite of the way people run their lives as you can get. And yet it generates more productivity, more creativity, and more results than a big company pouring huge amounts of money into innovation. That's why I say this is experiential and it's a learning laboratory, because absent this format, individuals can go their entire career and never experience that and never have their eyes opened to how innovation actually works. And like how do you put different ideas together? How does interacting with new people and taking action immediately result in magic, right? So the hackathon, I mean, and so whether it's a big law firm or a big company doing it for its own sort of selfish reasons, or in the case of a law school, teaching this this experience that people would otherwise not have, the learning from that is that's why I say it's life-changing. And again, this is why I'm personally passionate about this, why I founded the global legal hackathon, because it's so important, especially in law. And so I think it's what I've just described. You can't teach that in a classroom setting, right? It's this magic that once you experience it, you can't forget it, right? You can't unsee it. I mean, once you've seen that random people can get together for a weekend, and create something that's actually can go to market, I mean, that's remarkable, right? To go from random to magic it's 180 degrees from the legal industry, which is why I wish more law schools would embrace this. I mean, because it really it's not overstating things to say this will change the way someone does everything potentially. So that's in my mind, that's the key thing that's learned is how randomness, combined with action, combined with no politics, unleashes sort of human potential. So I think that's really what I'm after. There isn't any one specific thing. Once that experience has been generated for an individual, it changes their life.
Thank you, David. And Maria, as an organizer to 3 hackathons, especially, what did you learn?
What I have seen is that those who are there and see it, they realize that innovation is here and I can do it. It's not something as David said. You have to do it. You don't have to learn it. You have to do it. And once you do it, you realize, okay, this is it. That is why it's so difficult. Sometimes people ask me, like, I want to do a workshop with you on this kind of innovative methodologies. Okay, virtually, I can do it, but I know it's never the same, because this means touching, this means feeling, this means, I don't know, it's a lot of being there. Well, I think that universities, they get back brand positioning and brand strengthening. They also learn other ways of teaching, because suddenly you realize that you don't need to be so formal that you can also teach just by making things, you know, and having people talk about it, and then discussing and then listening to each other and making questionnaires, etc. I know that in the US, some universities are more modern, but at least in my country and in many European countries, teaching is very traditional and it's more like the old fashioned, the old way. One teacher talks and the rest listen. Then what I said already, I think that universities realize that this is a very, very good tool to make the students be proud and happy because they enjoy, because they have fun. And then I think that universities realize that collaboration and looking around and getting new people that they don't know in the university, like for instance, these hackers and user experience people or designers people, can be something very nice. Because as we all know, lawyers, we can no longer work alone. We need to understand all these disciplines and we need to work together with these other professionals to service better citizens, clients, customers, etc. So these are my...
Thank you, Maria. Diane?
Sure, thank you. I will try to kind of wrap up this question and not be duplicative of David's great ideas and Maria's great ideas. Of course, kind of the multidisciplinary approach is key. One thing, the question, you know, what are we teaching participants and organizers? Frankly, sometimes I don't know that we're teaching much. I like to think of it as we're sparking ideas. So David talked about kind of these events and this environment kind of really impacting the trajectory of legal careers. And I think in some cases that is very true. Not every law student, though, is going to go on to really focus on innovation and really, you know, go down this path. And that's just the reality in my experience of working with law students for, you know, 12 years now. So I think if we can spark at least awareness of this type of thinking and awareness of the challenges, that to me is one thing you can teach even the student that isn't going to necessarily change their entire career trajectory. I think there's still benefit in kind of sparking, at least they're aware of that and aware that some lawyers do and aware that kind of this more broad school of thought is out there. One very narrow concrete addition that we haven't touched upon is presentation skills. So I teach legal writing and oral argument and legal communication. And in my experience, these events really hammer that home for students. For example, you do a day or two of work, or even longer. You may have, depending on the panel of your, or kind of the format of your event, you may have 5 minutes to pitch that to a panel of judges. And so what a skill that is for a lawyer to be able to figure out how to boil down, you know, all these ideas into, I only have 5 minutes with a captive audience, whether that's 10 slides, 2 slides, right? Both written and oral, that has been very powerful for students, because we've had some students where the judges say, your idea was actually the best. We just didn't really understand it until the very end of what you were saying. Or if you had only presented it this way, instead of waiting for the Q&A, I think you would have captured us right away. And so again, with law students, we talk about that in legal writing. We talk about oral communication to a court and how small the window is of human attention. And so in a very concrete way, I think events like a hackathon really, in my experience, have cemented that for students of how powerful it can be to learn how to communicate your ideas in a really concise kind of startup pitch deck manner.
If I can add one thing to a comment that Maria made, speaking of conservative law school education, this is one area, so hackathons in particular, where we feel that the United States is behind the rest of the world. And that may be because the US has a very conservative legal industry, but we've had some of the most robust participation in our global hackathon from Europe, Spain in particular. But we've found that, and this is just a compliment to the rest of the world, that really the United States is behind, and much of the rest of the world is more progressive when it comes to embracing what we're talking about on this panel. The exception being Suffolk, which is absolutely a leader in the United States for this.
You know, yeah, I think that, David, you know, what is important is that you need to create a culture of innovation. And in Spain, uh, there have been one, two, three, at least three initiatives of hackathons. And I think and we all, the ones who have done it, have communicated quite well. And I think that that's probably why, you know, when you propose a global hackathon in Spain, already for 2 years, there have been 2 or 3 hackathons. Yeah. So you were lucky because you were not coming to the desert. You were coming to the, you know,
the oasis. The oasis.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So our third question, it's also a little bit related to the second question. Can you tell about your experience organizing a hackathon? And this time, Maria, if you can start the first, and Diane, and later David.
Thank you, Ibru. Okay, I'm going to be very sincere because I think that's what can be the takeoff of this meeting. So first thing, it is impossible to organize a perfect hackathon because a hackathon is a complex thing which has many stakeholders, and ideally they should be flexible, and with flexibility come the problems, but it's no problem that there are problems. So relax, you know, see the problems coming, have always a plan B, and be ready. Maybe at the last minute, 3 programmers, that's the typical problem, do not come up because their mother is dying, you know, 3 at the same time with the same excuse. I'm making a joke, a very bad one, but okay. But this happens. Something will fail. The heating, I remember the first hackathon I attended to in Bilbao, there was no heating and there was hardly food. I promise you, I suffered, I was cold and I was hungry, but I enjoyed. So no problem. Second thing, attract software developers to the legal hackathon. This is not easy because developers are busy, and if they are, you have to choose between developing a game or developing a tool to hack, and then developing an app for access to justice, A, B, C, they will do A and then B and then C, but not Z. So justice is not sexy, and you have to tell them that justice is sexy. And touch their hearts, because a lot of them have suffered problems with contracts. Their parents have got legal problems with the inheritance. So these kind of things, when you mention them, suddenly they say, oh, it's true. Justice is important. Then the third thing is, despite imperfection, I have always seen that hackathons are a superb experience. And the atmosphere, and this is very important, don't be legal when you're organizing a hackathon. This is fun, this is relaxed, and this is joyful. So people have to come there not dressed with their nice suit, but dressed with their jeans and their sneakers and a t-shirt, and you know, just relax. Then clear agenda. It doesn't work if you just go there like a improvisation. No, you have to know what you're going to do. So you have to have an agenda, you who organize it. From 6 to 8 we do this, from 8 to, and you have to be rigid, because there will be again energies and groups who are meeting each other, who want to know each other because they know they have to get to know each other to be the winners. So sometimes they don't want to do what you want them to do. So have a clear idea. Then crisis, because there are conflicts sometimes. There are groups that do not work. There is people who create problems, and you have to be there and mediate and listen and try to solve these problems at the moment. And then finally, I think it's very, very nice to go there, not you, the organizer, and to people, but also these individuals who are called facilitators, people who enjoy hackathons and who can help the teams to do a better work, who can sometimes give a little lecture in the middle of the hackathon so that you stop working and listen for a while. But these kind of professionals being around there are super, super useful. So I hope that this helps to you.
Diane?
Thank you. I want to start here with the idea that there's no one size fits all, right? And so I will start on kind of the, if you will, the beginner model for those that maybe don't have much experience. David will follow my remarks, and I imagine he will talk more about kind of the big event. And in fact, his event is the biggest or one of the biggest hackathons. And that is amazing and terrific. But I think realistically is not every school, and in fact, no schools are going to be able to kind of necessarily hit the ground running with these huge events that involve 10 or 20 partners. And that's okay. So I'll preface my remarks by saying kind of, this is the start small approach that I think can still bring great benefit to students. So at Suffolk, we pair with Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, which is a large insurance company that has kind of an innovative legal group, and they love to support our law school and love to work with students. So that's one kind of concrete tip. It doesn't necessarily need to be 5 partners, right? It doesn't even need to necessarily have any partners, but maybe just finding one partner outside the law school to start with. We have done the event 4 years in a row. I'll talk about kind of the in-person event, and this year we obviously had to go virtual, but in the spirit of we'll all be doing in-person again quite soon, I'll kind of relay that experience. We had our first few years only about probably 30 or 40 students doing the event. It was a one-day event called the Boston Design Challenge. And so again, the word hackathon, whether it's pitch deck, startup, flash hack, meetup weekend, right? You hear all these different terms. Our flavor was the one-day design challenge. Students worked in groups that they formed themselves. There were 3 tracks. So that morning they were given either in-house counsel track, public judiciary track, or kind of traditional law firm, law practice management track. And so at the outset of the day, they knew that would be their focus. From there, we provided kind of a special sauce, meaning that's what we called it, kind of an angle to the problem that they were going to have to think of and give a solution to. So of course, the online one this year, the special sauce was virtual law practice and kind of the challenges of COVID. Kind of in the past, students worked very traditionally on whiteboards. We set up each group in different spots with a flip chart and post-it notes, and tried to create kind of a real organic environment for collaboration. Like Maria said, I think the focus is fun. We had each team name themselves, give us a team logo, give a team motto. And at first that seems to me, frankly, a little cheesy. In my experience, the students love it. It helps create that kind of light atmosphere to an event like this and help them see that it's different than maybe what they're doing in their other law school environments. We of course provided food, which we haven't talked about, but can always help people enjoy the day. Towards the end of the day, students had to then go into presentation mode. So we had a very structured timeline, which I would suggest. I think at first blush, it can seem like that kind of dampers the freedom of the event, but I think a strict timeline actually helps everyone and keeps people on track. We had a panel of 3 judges, 1 academic, 1 in-house, and 1 from the judiciary, which was terrific. The judges really weren't part of the day much at all until the end, and each team had 5 minutes to present with no more than 5 slides, and then up to 2 minutes of Q&A from the judges. So a total of 7 minutes, and that's it. The judges then deliberated and came back, and of course, we all recognize it's important to kind of explain what the judges were thinking, who won, why they won, and that in and of itself is such a great learning experience for students. So that's my experience, at least kind of before we paired with some other schools and took that virtual this year, using a design platform called Mural, which is a tool and a vendor that supported the event, that, if you will, is kind of an online sticky note tool, for lack of a better description. And students loved that. And so that was a great experience doing that virtually. But I guess the moral of my story would be it's okay to start small without knowing kind of the audience on this webinar. Not every event is going to be a big one right away, but more the idea that even a half-day event can maybe spark things in the right direction for these students, and give you kind of small pieces of experience to hopefully grow the event bigger in the future.
Thank you very much, Diane. And David,
My turn?
please. Yes.
Yeah, so Diane, in the interest of entertaining the audience, I'm going to disagree completely with you. So the history of the Global Legal Hackathon, actually, it was conceived in Boston, across the river from you, at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Cambridge, right near MIT. I was in town for an event we had organized at MIT, which of course does not have a law school, but is, one of the preeminent technology universities in the world. And I remember we were in the hotel room with the team, and I said, we need more engagement around the world. We're a small technology company. We need to meet more people. And so we were sitting in a hotel room across the river there, and I posed the question to my team. Can we run a global hackathon? And most of my team responded, "That's ridiculous. We need to start small, do it in one city or two cities, like prove it first, and then maybe go bigger." And I was the CEO, and so I won the argument. It's instructive how we launched the Global Legal Hackathon. Without having created it, we had Richard Tromans of artificiallawyer.com do a blog post. And he's obviously one of the prolific bloggers in the legal industry. And he, on December 4th, 2017, proposed this idea. This is before we had done anything. We just literally floated this idea out to the world via a blog post saying, "Hey, we've had this idea. Let's do a global hackathon," not knowing what would happen. And 2 months later, we had 40 cities and 4,000 people from 20 countries that signed on to that. We didn't pay them. They didn't work for us. We had no incentives. We thought, it was my philosophy, put it out there, like open it to people. So it's the opposite of sort of control and organized and linear. Throw it out there, invite interested parties, to join in and contribute. And it turned into this massive event. And so I think the reason I mentioned this, so Diane, I certainly don't disagree with reasonable sort of scoping and work on this, but the reason I sort of playfully am disagreeing is the reflex of most people is to say, well, let's start small, let's be careful. And I'll tell you that can end up being more costly and harder. It's more a question of how you formulate it, like what's the purpose, what's the audience, what's the intent. What we discovered is by sort of presenting a vision for this that activated and inspired the right parties, that brought them to the event. And the event then created itself on a huge scale. And so what we've seen around the world is that because we see this, right, in one weekend every year, different countries, different organizations, trying to do this. Some of them end up with 20 people, and some of them end up with 400. And these are all big cities and smart people. And the way they do it, and again, this speaks to intent. If you want a small event, then fine, do a small event. But if what you're looking for is big impact, and synergies from what I described, lots of different people who've never met in organizations and creativity and sort of that dynamism, the formulation of it, because it's effectively it's almost a charitable or nonprofit type of event. You want as many people contributing as possible. And so if you create the conditions for that, then it can be very inexpensive. It can be effortless. It can be large, dynamic, like all the magic that I talked about. And so I think if the reflex is to go small, I think that's the wrong, because you think that's safer. That's the wrong perspective. If you want a small event, run a small event. That's fine. But if you want a big dynamic event, go the opposite of control. implement the right sort of framework and vision. Make sure you've informed the right parties. So in other words, if you want lots of students to be involved, make sure it's formulated in a way that's exciting to students, for its purpose and what they get out of it. It's because it's a voluntary thing. It's voluntary for everyone, and so getting the conditions right at the beginning can make it easy and inexpensive, and fabulously successful. And so it's almost part and parcel of kind of the hackathon concept, which is if you manage and run and formulate the event in the spirit of the hackathon, and all that's different about that versus kind of command and control, especially in the legal world. So if the hackathon organizers present this in a way that's consistent with a hackathon ethic, then you can have an extraordinary event. And so it's not a question of big or small. It's a question of setting the framework, setting the vision, inviting and informing the parties that you want to participate, and then it organically creates the outcomes that you want.
Yeah, just quickly to kind of close the loop on that. I think there's room in the world for both, if you will. And I think I'm looking at it from the very much the academic point of view. And David, earlier you had said, like, why aren't more law schools doing this? And I consistently talk to different faculty at law schools that say, I don't have the resources to do that. I don't have the time, like, to set it all up. And it seems too big. So I think there's almost this mental block of, I can't get there, which I agree with you. Once you set it up well, it can kind of run itself.
That's the key.
I think that there's kind of a perception that it's harder than it is. So I think the smaller events can be a way at least to overcome that perception very early on, and then hopefully lead to bigger, more events.
This is an important point, because I've seen this again and again, because law schools, you would think law schools would have the biggest audience, and they don't. For this, I mean, they have students, they're young, they're energetic. You would think that these would be enormous, but I think Diane, just to dwell on this, because I know we agree, but just to tease out some of the detail on it, that perspective that it's hard and expensive and cumbersome, is that's exactly what the hackathon experience is attacking. That when you have, as I described, from a participant standpoint, when you have the right people in the room under the right conditions, magic happens at the hackathon participant level. Applying that same mentality at the organizer level is the same effect, where I agree that if you're in a command and control mindset, where you have to organize it, you have to pay for it, you have to get people, that's incredibly cumbersome. We've experienced that. I'll give you one quick example. One thing that's always been very hard for us is to run hackathons in New York City. And you would think, it's the legal capital of the world, it should have the biggest participation. That's not what we've seen. The biggest participation has been in Warsaw, in Poland, and cities in Brazil, and Hong Kong, other places. But New York City, we've struggled to get 100 people in the room. And I can tell you from my experience, in the command and control mindset of okay, we have to run this in New York, we have to be successful, we have to get people there. We've spent huge amounts of money trying to make it successful, in New York of all places. And in my view, we've largely failed. But that's because we got the dynamics wrong for that community and that market, such that the super wealthy, super focused, super competitive New York legal market looks at the hackathon and says, "Why bother?" And so we just one more detail on that. The New York being New York, when we ran the Global Legal Hackathon the first year, we had $100,000 in sponsorship money for a weekend for one location, which, if anyone has run hackathons, knows that that's insane. $100,000 in sponsorship money, and only 75 participants showed up. So do the math on that. That's over $1,000. You could actually pay people to show up. that speaks to, that's an extreme example, but it makes my point that if you take responsibility for like running the whole thing and making it successful and getting people there, yes, it can be very cumbersome, very expensive, very hard, which is why I emphasize sort of best practices. And so Diane, so to wrap this up, if from an academic standpoint, you're running more of a kind of a set piece organized event, absolutely. I think be careful and be modest about it. If you're going for kind of the bigger community random access hackathon type event, then setting up the conditions correctly can make it almost free and easy. And doing it wrong indeed can be very expensive, very hard.
Thank you very much for the insights, David. And I think the discussion also it's a very good ground for our next fourth question. So, what are the key ingredients to a successful hackathon? And David, if we can start with you this time, and then Maria and Diane, and just to be time-wise, if we can limit our answers in 3 minutes, it would be great.
Yeah, so just, I think we touched on a lot of this on the last question. To pick up on Diane's point, know the intent, right? I mean, is it a design thinking workshop? Is this kind of a wide open entrepreneurial innovation event? Like, know what the purpose is at the beginning. That then informs whether or not this is like the pure wide open hackathon style or more of, again, an organized workshop style. So know what the purpose is, and then design the conditions for success. And so it's in. I think there are more, I guess, details for it depending on which style of event you plan to run. I'm obviously an expert in sort of the free form, free association model, and I think I already described what goes into that. I mean, we launched a global event on a blog post, right, which then happened 2 months later, and that was from an organization, my technology company, that had about 10 people at the time. So that speaks to what's possible when you activate the right sort of allies in the community. But I think first and foremost, know what the purpose is. And design from there, and make sure you're consistent with that purpose.
Thank you.
Well, in my case, I want to add good challenges, because hackathons normally try to tackle challenges. And what I have seen is that the challenges are key to let's say, good tools and so that the process is fine as well. I remember one hackathon, I was an attendee, not an organizer, and one of the challenges had to do with improving a functionality of an existing legal tech. And it was so boring, I mean, because it was too technical. And I think that hackathons, although your final goal is to create something technical, in fact, the final goal is not that one. The final goal is that you go through the process and you, as a lawyer, understand how technical people work, but it's not really making something technical. So for me, the challenges are very important. Then secondly, although I agree with David that it's very nice to be flexible and leave space and blah, 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 I insist that I think that you need to have a clear program and clear instructions. Within the instructions, or what I mean with instruction is a program, a timeline, etc. Because otherwise the chaos is too chaotic and then there is nothing coming out. So that's my second, let's say, key ingredient. Then enough developers, because I think that is what is sometimes missing. And if there are not enough developers, lawyers can be very frustrated because they don't have the right person to create their super incredible platform that they believe they're going to end up doing in one weekend. And then nice location, good light, heating, food, drinks, I think is essential.
Thank you, Maria. Diane?
Sure. I'll again try to chime in with just some additional kind of concrete considerations to think about. So one angle to kind of the theme or the purpose is I was always told with writing and with everything, you can never be too narrow. And I think that's important here that, you know, kind of the more specific you can be, again, depending on the purpose of your event. It makes me think of MIT, I think back in 2014, had a hackathon called How to Make the Breast Pump Not Suck. And that always stands out in my mind as a very clear purpose to the event and very narrow and very pointed and not bashful about that at all. And so I think that's kind of one thing. The other thing is I think it's helpful to not only kind of announce the purpose, but give it an actual story. So we've had examples where we had kind of a hypothetical client that kind of gave the problem, or, you know, a guest speaker at the outset to kind of kick things off. Some, again, from the student perspective, at least, something more to kind of capture their attention, if you will, and their interest, more than just kind of me having a PowerPoint slide to kick it off. A participant agreement is something that almost always is helpful. Again, the larger the event, different considerations. There was a diversity lab large hackathon in the United States in the past few years that had 60, 70 law firms participating. And I spoke with the founder and she said, we didn't even try to do a participant agreement because there was no way 60 law firms were going to agree to something like that. And that wasn't the purpose of the event. We've done that in hard copy, right? When participants show up that morning. But I think more appropriately, you could flip that, post it online, do an interactive Google form, making sure attendees know the plan, they know the judging criteria, they know prizes, if any. You perhaps get a release if you want to use images or recordings from the event. So we've included kind of a media marketing release, again, kind of getting very nitty gritty here with some of the details. And then the intellectual property. So again, that's an interest area of mine. We could talk for hours about that. I guess the bottom line is you don't want to ignore it, right? As Maria said, it's fun to think like everything here could be the next great thing. It's probably not, but as lawyers, we obviously want to kind of anticipate that it might be. So there's different ways to think about this. And, you know, it's certainly not one size fits all. It depends on who's running the hackathon, what the purpose is. But just to think about kind of educating participants, meaning the idea of, I call it incoming intellectual property. So attendees could be participating this event, say on the weekend, and they work for company X during the week. In theory, company X might have an employment agreement with that person that is so broad as to cover kind of those outside initiatives that in theory, something they invent at a hackathon over the weekend could actually be kind of the intellectual property of their employer. Is that your problem to solve? No, but I've seen great hackathon participants agreement kind of have a little bit of an education portion that says, you know, you might want to check, hey, participant, you might want to check to make sure that you're not subject to any kind of intellectual property claims from a current or prior employer that might apply to whatever you happen to create in this event. Right. So that's kind of a low level way to think about kind of the idea of them having this incoming burden, if you will, to what they are about to hopefully create. The other more obvious kind of piece in terms of kind of a successful hackathon and a good participant agreement is what I think of as the outgoing IP, right? Like what is created at the event. And again, some vendors and sponsors take the approach of it's ours, right? We're putting up the money, we own it. And at first blush, that seems maybe not great, but in fact, in some hackathons, they're the ones with the money and the teeth, right? And the ability to really kind of get a product going after the dust settles from the hackathon and really hopefully maybe see it, you know, to the light of day. So that's not always a bad thing, but maybe it's not that. And it's the idea of we really just want to foster creation and participant, you're going to own it all, right? We make no claim to any kind of code or a design trademark that you come up with or whatever it is. There's also the idea of joint works, which again, can get complicated, but thinking about if you're going to have people work in teams, you may want to educate them in the participant agreement with a very high level sentence or two, providing resources that if they're going to work together after the event, or if they do create something, they may want to see these sample agreements or at least consider it. So the bottom line, there's not one size fits all with a participant agreement. I think it almost always is a good idea to try to have one, to give it to people in advance. My final concrete point is, are you going to charge for participation? Totally depends on the nature of the event. We've charged a small fee for that design challenge. And in some ways, I think it's helped have students have a little skin in the game. I would hate for resources to be used for an event and then 100 people sign up and 12 show up on the day, right? So that would be disappointing for everyone. So consideration in terms of one more concrete tip of what and whether to have a fee, and whether that might help kind of students be a little more engaged and coming to the event.
Thank you very much for all these concrete actions, suggestions. They are great, Diane. So my final question, I think I'm, after all these great explanations, I'm eager to, attend to one hackathon. So my question is, do you plan on organizing a hackathon in the future? And this time, Maria and then Diane and David, if you can answer this question, I think I and all the other attendees will be very happy.
So who first?
Maria.
Okay, yes, thank you, Ebru. As you know, ILSA wants to organize a hackathon next year. We want to put as a goal the objective of working together in pro of maybe the sustainability goal number 16, access to justice, and this is probably something we will do next year. Yeah, these are my plans regarding hackathons.
Thank you very much. And Diane?
Sure. So groups of Suffolk students have been part of different events and will continue to be. So I kind of support them in that regard. But Suffolk will continue to pair with Liberty Mutual. And now that this year has, in a good way, forced us to take that Boston Design Challenge virtual, we had participants this year from over 7 or 8 different law schools, which was terrific. We engaged more vendors, had more sponsors, which was interesting because we felt like virtually, what could we really offer them? But it actually turned out terrific, and there was a lot of opportunity for the students and the sponsors to engage. So I think one of the many silver linings of the pandemic is perhaps that. Another angle that we haven't talked about so much is kind of within a university, kind of cross-disciplinary events. So we've teamed up with the business school at Suffolk that wanted to do something involving climate change. And that was just a tremendous opportunity for our JD students to work with the business school. So we're going to try to continue to think of ways we can do that in the future. Again, the idea that David started with of working with people kind of outside your usual cone, if you will, is just a tremendous benefit for our students. So the Suffolk and Liberty Design Challenge will hopefully go be again probably this November, and if we go virtual, I'll hope everyone on this call and others would be excited to join us for that day.
That would be great. And David, we also have a question in the chat. Iga is asking, what about this edition of the Global Legal Hackathon? So I think a lot of us are curious about that as well.
Yeah, so how do I answer this? So in the middle of last year, we ran a special edition. So we ran the traditional Global Legal Hackathon in March, and about half the cities around the world had to cancel. And actually someone here on our attendee list is the executive director of the Global Legal Hackathon, Kira Markowicz, and she actually flew into Tel Aviv because we spread out and touch as many different venues for the hackathon each year. So she flew into Tel Aviv just as Israel was locking down, canceling the event. It was a crazy, crazy year. So the Global Legal Hackathon, which has always been an in-person event, and we kept thinking the world would open. We had the finals 2 years in New York, and it was going to be in London, and everyone wanted it to be in person. So we kept delaying, and the world locked down again. So we're actually about to host a virtual finals for the Global Legal Hackathon 2020 coming up in the next few weeks, just to wrap that up. The winners of this year's, or of 2020, will be invited to the hopefully in-person finals from the 2021. But I started to mention, we hosted a second version of the Global Legal Hackathon in partnership with the Financial Times in April and May of last year, and that was all virtual. And we built a special technology platform to support that. It was, I think, the biggest virtual hackathon in the history of the legal industry. We had 3,000 people and 250 organizations, 75 countries. That was so successful that we're bringing all those together for a hybrid format for 2021, which we think will be probably twice the size. So last year, I think we had, or it was headed towards 6,000 people. This year, the goal is about 10,000 people around the world. But the idea here is, for the Global Legal Hackathon, and what we do is we create infrastructure, best practices. It's the fact that there's a global aspect to the competition intensifies, I think, the engagement of various parties. So it works better because it's bigger in this case. But to anyone on this call, at a law school or law firm or company, all we're really trying to do with GLH is make it easier for interested parties to do it. So if you're a law school that's never run a hackathon before, I mean, you can, if you want, join the Global Legal Hackathon as a node or a local host of it. And so we help answer questions like, as Diane said, the participant agreement and the rubric for judging and all the other sort of best practices. And because it's part of the global event, you benefit from sort of that uplift from marketing and engagement standpoint, from participants, vendors, sponsors, that sort of thing. I mean, that really was, so my company takes no ownership, no IP, nothing. We just thought it would be helpful to create this platform to make it easier for more organizations, to run these events versus doing it yourself, where you have to do all the thinking, all the planning, all the organizing. I mean, if you, for anyone that's on this call that would like to participate in GLH 2021, it'll be a similar format to prior years, but it's and you still run it and host it and do everything locally. But we provide some of the best practices and infrastructure to make it easier. So if you wanted an easy way to begin from an organizer standpoint, we'll be announcing all the details for GLH 2021 probably in the next week. And it's open to anyone. Like literally any organization can host it and run it. I mean, it's again in the spirit and ethic of a hackathon. And if you're interested in this style of event, which is again free form, free association, big, then this is a good way to make it sort of easy, fast, and we think successful. So that's coming up potentially within days in terms of the announcement. Well, and there'll be some exciting new features to that. Ultimately, we would like to have that in-person finals for it to take place in London, probably in September.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. So since we are a bit running late, so I just want to thank you all for your great insights. And I just want to have 3 sentences that the participants can take away from today. So it will be a challenge to limit all these great insights in just 3 sentences, but it would be great. So Diane, can we start with you first, and then David and Maria, please?
Sure. I guess my 3 sentences would be kind of 3 themes. First, the big picture, remembering kind of why it's worth doing this in the first place, and the idea that we started with of kind of all students needing a taste of these innovative skills and thinking, even if they're not going to specialize in it per se. I guess 2, the idea of concrete details and having a schedule for planning your event, kind of a detailed timeline of what you want to accomplish and when leading up to an event. And then finally, something we haven't talked about I would encourage everyone to think about getting feedback after the event, right? Polling participants, debriefing, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work for improvement in the future.
Thanks a lot. And David, your 3 sentences.
As an organizer, embrace the hackathon ethic. Just do it. The Global Legal Hackathon, the biggest legal technology innovation event in the world, was launched with a blog post. That's all you need to know. Just do it.
Thank you. Maria?
Okay, what I think is that a hackathon is a superb experience both for organizers and participants, and it is one of the most efficient way to change your mindset into digital. And it is really rare that a startup is born in a hackathon. It happens, but it's rare. But that's really insignificant. What is important is the change of mindset. And finally, I think that law faculties should consider to organize at least one hackathon per year and help with then law students and the sector to actively work in the achievement of the Millennium Goals. Those are my sentences, Ibu. Thank you so much for the moderation.
Thank you very much, Maria. So before going into the Q&A, I just want to inform you of our future webinars. Sorry, can you see my screen now? I think you are seeing my screen, okay. So we will have our next event on 14th of April.
April. We cannot see.
Okay, sorry. Just give me 1 second.
Ibru, it doesn't matter. We are a little bit run out of time. Just say the dates and the topics of the 2 coming ones, and that's it.
Okay, sure. So on 14th of April, we will have what is a legal tech lab, when and how to set up one. And on 12th of May, we will have another webinar on coding. Should lawyers know how to program or not? So we would like to have all our speakers and guests again we would like to see them in these webinars. And before going into the Q&A, we had a little interactive surprise for you. But Carol, I think she just left. She's saying that she must get into another meeting. So I think we have to cancel this now because Carol has just left. So I will just get into the questions, and there was one from Nathan. Nathan, would you like to ask your question? If you're here, would you like to open your mic and your camera?
Hello, is this working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, perfect. It was just a question for everyone in terms of how do you keep energy high and people engaged when you're doing virtual events, specifically in terms of virtual hackathons? Thank you.
And who you would like to answer this question? And are you addressing this to?
I don't think I can answer because I haven't dared to do one. As I said, for me, the magic is in being in a hackathon. For many other things, like exchanging ideas or commenting or learning, I think that virtual is great. But a hackathon, I have my doubts. I don't know what you think, David and Diane. Do you think that a virtual hackathon could be as successful as a real one?
So we, as I mentioned, ran in partnership with the Financial Times, the biggest virtual hackathon, with about 3,000 people. We changed the format from 3 days to 3 weeks to appreciate that sort of the work style and pace and flow is going to be different. The way we, I think, made that effective, is we had, I think, better clarity on timeline, structure, approach, because you don't have people in the same room where you can just go ask a question and chit chat and freely associate. And so I guess my kind of quick suggestion would be, make sure you've organized the format, to fit, the reality of people's lives. So 3 days in person works, maybe 2 weeks virtually works for that different format. That's one. Two, obviously you need excellent communication. So for that virtual event that I mentioned, I was sending out updates, to all the participants, every couple of days, sort of, because again, you're not in the same room, and so you don't see everything that's happening. You don't see all the different teams. And so to be able to, communicate well in terms of what's happening in terms of our overall event is critical. And then finally, for that particular event, which it was more constrained than our normal in-person hackathons, which are free form in terms of ideas and teams. In the virtual event, we were much more focused on tightly articulated challenges. So it was there had to be more clarity, more communication, and different timeline, to fit the circumstance. It was hugely successful. I mean, it exceeded all expectations, but I think that's because we were careful about making it fit, the reality of the way people were working in a virtual world. Diane, I think you've had experience as well.
Yeah, I think everything important has been touched on. I guess I would just add the idea of flipping what you can, meaning, right, in an in-person, maybe you'd start with kind of some early remarks and training and a welcome, and that's fine. But that type of stuff in a virtual setting can delay and can frustrate people, and they would just want to get on with it. So we were able to flip a lot of the pre-event training for our students that we're going to be using Mural and using these different tools. So that way on the day of, we could kind of start off fun and fresh and really get going. And I think that helps keep the energy up.
Awesome, thanks very much.
Thank you. So I would like to just ask if there are any other questions, and in the chat there weren't any. So if there aren't any questions, I think we can move forward. Okay. So seeing that we are running a bit late, so I would like to thank everyone for their participation. I would like to thank our speakers, Diane, David, and Maria, for their inputs. We are now all very motivated. Actually, I am very motivated to participate to a hackathon. So thank you all very much.
Okay, do you mind putting your cameras for a second, all of you, so we take a final picture? A lot of people have already left, but there's no problem. We still have a nice picture. So all the attendees, todos los que estáis ahí, os podéis poner un momento la cámara, quien no le importe que le fotografiemos, ¿eh? So Diane, do you mind putting the camera on and?
I'm seeing her.
I'm sorry, this is Diane. I thought mine was on.
Okay.
It is. Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Well. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you in the coming one.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much.
Thank you to
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.